Hey guys, tonight we travel back, way back, past pyramids, past pharaohs, past the idea of kings and kingdoms, even past the invention of the wheel. Tonight we're wandering to the very edge of what anyone could call civilization. You're standing barefoot in the sticky, fertile mud of southern Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, and the air hums with mosquitoes, frogs, and the slow trickle of two legendary rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. You probably won't survive this, to be honest. The heat alone could cook an egg on your forehead, and clean drinking water is more a rumor than a resource. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You squint across a marshland where reeds sway in the evening breeze. Frogs croak, and smoke drifts lazily from a small cluster of huts made of woven reeds and coated in thick layers of river mud. Somewhere nearby, a man sharpens a flint blade while another adjusts a fishing net. This is Sumer, though no one here calls it that yet. They don't even have a word for civilization. They're just trying to keep their huts from collapsing. When the river floods again, the ground under your feet is slick, warm, and surprisingly rich. Every step squishes. The rivers that bring life also bring chaos. Unpredictable floods that can wipe out months of effort overnight. You imagine yourself standing beside one of the first humans to glance at the river and think, maybe we can control this. That thought, tiny, hopeful, dangerously ambitious, will become the foundation of cities, writing gods, and bureaucracy. But right now, it's just one tired person holding a basket of silt. A dragonfly buzzes past your ear. Somewhere, a child laughs as he chases a turtle through a shallow pool. The world smells of clay, smoke, and something faintly sour. Fermenting grain, maybe. You don't realize it yet, but this smell is history itself being brewed. The people here are among the first to figure out the impossible. You can stay in one place and survive. They've learned how to plant barley, wheat, and dates in neat rows, irrigate them using little trenches, and harvest enough food to last through the dry season. You could call them farmers, but really, they're the first experimenters in human stability. Before them, our ancestors wandered endlessly, following herds and seasons. Now, for the first time, you can picture smoke curling from the same hearth day after day, year after year. And what's more astonishing, they start to plan. Grain doesn't just feed families, it feeds possibilities. With extra food, not everyone has to farm. Someone can specialize. Craft pots, carve idols, watch the skies. That's how division of labor sneaks into the world, disguised as convenience. You can almost hear a conversation. Hey, I'll trade you 2 sacks of barley if you make me a better fishing hook. Deal. And just like that, the first economy wheezes into life. No coins, no taxes, just trust and memory. One mainstream historical fact here, archaeologists call this moment the Ubaid period, around 6000 BCE. It's the warm-up act before cities truly form. Villages are small but growing, made of mud brick, clustered around early temples. People are experimenting with irrigation canals. The population might be a few hundred per settlement. Tiny by today's standards, but revolutionary for the time. Now, here's a quirky tidbit. Some of those early houses had tiny clay figurines buried under the floor. Wide-eyed little beings with pointed heads. Historians still argue whether they were fertility idols, toys, or something closer to protective spirits. Imagine sweeping your dirt floor one morning and realizing you're literally living above a small army of baked clay ancestors. As night falls over the marshes, you feel a change in the air, a rhythm almost. The same pattern that beats through your own heart. Wake, work, eat, rest, repeat. Except now, that rhythm has a home. The villagers start to gather. They've built a raised platform, a proto-temple. Though right now it's more like a community meeting spot. Torches flicker, and someone hums a low, melodic chant. Maybe they're thanking the river gods. Or maybe they're just trying to keep the mosquitoes away. But it's here, in this dim light, that the idea of belief begins to settle. Why does the river flood? Someone wonders. Because the gods are angry. Another mutters, half serious. It's the easiest answer to the hardest question. And it sticks. From now on, every natural mystery will have a divine personality attached to it: the water, the wind, the sun, even that weird sickness that makes your neighbor sneeze himself into oblivion. Historians still argue whether organized religion in Sumer began as a spiritual instinct or a social tool. A way to keep everyone cooperative. Maybe both. After all, a shared god is easier to follow than a shared irrigation schedule. Now imagine yourself trudging back to your reed hut. Inside, it's barely cooler than outside, but the smell of baked grain fills the air. A clay jar of beer, yes, beer, sits in the corner, thick and cloudy, more like liquid bread than the crisp stuff you know. You dip a reed straw in and take a sip. It's sour, heavy, and oddly comforting. Congratulations, you've just tasted one of humanity's oldest inventions. You sit cross-legged on a woven mat, watching a smoky fire dance in the hearth. The shadows of insects flicker on the wall. Somewhere outside, a cow lowing sounds almost like a lullaby. You glance at the stars, bright, enormous, and realize the same constellations will one day guide sailors and astrologers. For now, they're just decoration. Life here isn't easy. Disease, floods, snakes, starvation. Take your pick. But the people endure. They've learned to trust the cycle: flood, plant, harvest, repeat. You can almost feel their quiet pride. They're taming chaos, one canal at a time. As the night deepens, an elder tells a story. He describes how long ago, before anyone built houses, a great hero tamed the river by talking to it. Literally talking. The crowd nods in awe. It's fiction, of course, but fiction with a purpose. It gives meaning to mud and suffering. It's the first draft of myth, and myth is the fuel of civilization. You feel drowsy listening to the crackling fire. The elder's voice lowers, slower now, words melting together like syrup. He says that when the rivers rise, they carry the breath of gods. When they fall, the gods are sleeping. It's oddly poetic, and surprisingly meteorological for 6,000 BCE. The night ends quietly. The villagers drift inside, curling up on mats beside their small fires. You lie awake, hearing the trickle of water outside, and thinking how this fragile village, this accidental experiment, will one day bloom into cities with walls, schools, temples, kings, and accountants. Everything you know about civilization will root itself here, in this mud, with these people. You glance once more at the stars, and the idea of time itself feels heavy. Thousands of years will pass before anyone calls this place Sumer. But tonight, you're here at the moment before everything changes, before humans learn to write, to rule, to argue, to dream on paper. The river whispers. The reeds sway. The future hums softly in the dark. The morning light creeps across the muddy plain, like honey dripping over clay. You wake to the low drone of insects, the splashing of someone wading knee deep in water, and the gentle clink of a wooden bucket against a canal wall. The air is thick, warm, and smells faintly of wet earth and something sweet, perhaps dates fermenting under the sun. You step outside your reed hut and squint. In the distance, a line of villagers moves like ants along a canal trench. They're carrying woven baskets filled with mud and broken reeds, patching leaks before the afternoon sun hardens the walls. It's irrigation day, and no one gets to skip irrigation day. This, right here, is the quiet genius of Sumer. No marble palaces, no grand inventions yet. just a network of ditches and channels so precise that it turns the wild floods of the Euphrates into predictable, usable water. You see, without these muddy veins cutting through the landscape, this land would swing violently between famine and flood. The Sumerians learn early that control equals survival. You grab a bucket, of course, because that's what's expected. The canal walls are soft, the water cool against your bare legs. Every movement is slow, rhythmic, hypnotic. Scoop, pour, pat. Scoop, pour, pat. You begin to sense why early civilizations clung so tightly to routine. It's not just work, it's stability, ritual control. A mainstream historical fact. By around 5000 BCE, Sumerians were mastering irrigation networks stretching for miles. They built levees, dikes, and reservoirs using nothing but manpower, reed mats, and hope. The system was so effective that it sustained some of the densest populations the ancient world had seen. Imagine that. The first engineers didn't build towers. They built trenches. But irrigation had side effects. You'll notice, after a few years, that the soil starts tasting salty. Not to you, of course, unless you enjoy licking dirt, but the crops feel it. The Tigris and Euphrates carry minerals that linger after water evaporates. Over time, fields whiten with salt crusts, barley yields drop, and farmers panic. The clever Sumerians try rotating fields, digging new canals, even switching crops, but salinization becomes a long-term nemesis. Historians still argue whether this creeping salt was one of the reasons their civilization eventually declined. A little too much water, a little too little foresight. As you work, a man nearby, bare-chested, sunburned, probably 50 but looks 70, starts humming a tune. It's wordless, just a rhythmic chant to match the shovel strokes. His daughter, maybe 10 years old, follows behind, tamping the soft edges of the canal with her feet. She giggles every time her heel sinks deep into the mud. Civilization may be being born here, but it's still deeply human, messy, sweaty, half playful. Around noon, when the sun hits full furnace mode, everyone takes shelter under a reed awning. Someone brings a clay jug filled with beer, still that thick, yeasty stuff from last night, and passes it around. You drink, grimace, and try not to choke. It's bitter and warm, but you can't deny it's refreshing. You've earned it. While you rest, you look around. The land is flat and endless, dotted with palm trees, little mud huts, and the occasional bleached skull of an ox. Somewhere beyond the horizon, you can sense the pull of the great rivers, snaking like twin serpents through the plains. Without them, this place would be barren desert. With them, it's paradise. Now here's a quirky tidbit. The Sumerians didn't have rainfall worth mentioning, so all farming depended on these artificial canals. They even developed early measuring rods, basically giant reeds cut to standard lengths, to calculate how deep and wide canals should be. Archaeologists have found marks that suggest they already used geometry before Pythagoras was a twinkle in Greece's future. You might joke that the first math test was just, find out why your neighbor's field is stealing all your water. And yes, water theft was a big deal. If a farmer's levee burst and flooded someone else's plot, they'd be shouting, maybe fists, maybe worse. Later on, these disputes would be recorded in clay tablets, tiny lawsuits, centuries before anyone called them that. Civilization, it turns out, begins not with peace, but with arguments about plumbing. The afternoon brings more work. You join a team clearing a blockage where reeds have tangled in a gate. The water rushes through with a satisfying glug once it's free, swirling tiny fish past your ankles. You wonder, just for a moment, if the fish know they're swimming through human history. Probably not. Fish are famously bad historians. In the evening, the community gathers again at the central platform, the same one from last night. A priest, or maybe just the most convincing loud talker in the village, stands on the mound and raises his arms toward the orange sky. He chants a blessing to the river gods. Enki, Lord of Water, is a popular favorite. The people murmur in response. You catch fragments. May the channels flow clean. May the barley stand tall. May the river sleep kindly this year. There's comfort in the repetition. You realize something subtle. Irrigation isn't just about farming. It's about faith. The water's behavior feels like a god's mood. Unpredictable yet essential. Every drought, every flood becomes a message. That's how religion and engineering become siblings here. Born from the same muddy cradle, a group of children runs past, laughing, chasing a tiny clay boat down the canal. It bobs along, tilts and capsizes. They groan in unison, then start shaping another one. It's a small thing, but it hints at something larger. Curiosity, creativity, the seeds of invention. Maybe one of those kids will grow up to invent writing, or the wheel, or taxes, less exciting, but inevitable. As twilight spreads, the canals shimmer like veins of bronze in the fading light. Frogs croak louder. Mosquitoes resume their evening buffet. Someone beats a slow rhythm on a drum. A hollowed log stretched with animal skin. The sound echoes across the water. Steady, calm, almost heartbeat-like. You sit on the edge of the canal, toes in the cool current. The village glows faintly from torchlight and fires, the first faint city lights of human history. You think of how fragile it all is, how one bad flood, one long drought, could erase every trace of it. Yet, somehow, they'll endure. They'll build stronger levees, organize work crews, and eventually create governments to manage it all. Bureaucracy will be born right here, out of the mud and panic of irrigation. You glance toward the river again, hearing it murmur like a living thing. The Sumerians believed it was alive, a god whose favor had to be earned. When the waters rose gently, they praised him. When they surged and destroyed crops, they performed rituals, even sacrifices, to soothe his temper. Historians still argue whether these rituals were genuine faith or clever social control. Ways for priests to keep everyone united under shared fear and gratitude. A breeze passes. You can almost hear whispers in the reeds, soft and strange. Maybe it's just wind. Maybe it's 7,000 years of human anxiety about weather. Either way, it's oddly comforting. Later, you help haul water jars back to the village. They're heavy, awkward, and you spill half of it on your legs. Someone cracks a joke about you, watering yourself like a barley stalk. Everyone laughs, softly, sleepily. That's the thing about these people. For all their struggle, they still find humor in mud. Dinner is simple. Flatbread, roasted fish, and a handful of dates. The sweetness lingers as you lie back under the open sky. The stars pulse gently. You trace the faint glow of the Milky Way, wondering if the first astronomers were just farmers trying to guess when the floods would return. They probably were. Somewhere in the darkness, a small clay lamp flickers beside a canal. It reflects on the water like a trembling twin flame. You imagine that lamp as a metaphor for civilization. Fragile, flickering, but determined to stay lit against the endless night. You close your eyes, listening to the water flow, and realize something quietly profound. This sound, the slow trickle of controlled river, is the first true lullaby of humanity. For the first time, our ancestors can sleep without fear of wandering beasts or starving tomorrow. They've built something permanent, and permanence feels like peace. And even though you know the salt will one day return, and floods will come again, and empires will rise and fall over this same mud, tonight it feels eternal. The canal hums softly, the stars blink slowly, and civilization keeps flowing, quiet, steady, unstoppable. Dawn breaks in streaks of gold and rose over the flat horizon, and you wake to a sound new to your ears. A kind of pounding rhythm echoing faintly across the plain. It's not thunder. It's not war, not yet. It's hundreds of feet, bare, caroused, determined, trampling the hard earth in synchronized lines. The air smells of sweat, river clay, and the faint sweetness of barley porridge being cooked somewhere nearby. You stretch, blink the sleep from your eyes, and realize that something enormous is happening around you. The villages you saw before are swelling, fusing, morphing into something unrecognizable. You're standing at the birth of a city-state, a miracle made of mud bricks and human stubbornness. You walk along a newly carved road, just a wide dirt path really, but it feels organized, almost purposeful. On one side, a team of workers shapes bricks in the sun, their hands coated in a reddish glaze of clay and straw. On the other, someone drives a pair of oxen dragging a wooden sledge loaded with dried reeds. The air hums with chatter, hammering, bleating, laughter, the rustle of trade. Civilization is no longer a dream or a fragile experiment. It's a construction site that never sleeps. You can see the center of it all rising ahead, a platform tiered and immense, built from baked brick. This in time will become the Ziggurat, the beating heart of Sumerian cities. Right now, it's still rough and crooked, crawling with workers. You can almost hear a foreman shouting in early Sumerian, "No, no, the other side." The other side? A mainstream historical fact. By around 4000 BCE, cities like Uruk and Lagash had emerged across southern Mesopotamia. Uruk alone may have housed over 40,000 people, mind-blowingly large for its time. That's bigger than many medieval cities would be thousands of years later. Imagine trying to coordinate that without electricity, roads, or phones. You'd need something stronger than luck. You'd need organization, leadership, belief, and a healthy dose of fear. As you wander deeper, you notice how tightly packed everything feels. Narrow lanes twist between houses. Goats bleat from rooftops. Merchants shout offers from shaded stalls. There's the scent of baking bread, hot oil, and animal dung. Every corner hides a sound. Clay scraping on clay, a child's cry, the murmur of a priest reciting to a small audience. This is Uruk, or something close to it, still half-born and bustling. You pause at a stall where a man offers you roasted locusts on skewers. You decline politely. He shrugs, bites into one, and grins. You can't help laughing. Civilization's getting weirdly tasty. But what's truly new here isn't the food or even the buildings. It's the hierarchy. For the first time, not everyone is equal. Some wear fine linen robes, walk with measured pride, and carry staffs engraved with symbols. Others, mud-smeared, stooped silent, haul baskets and bow when those robed figures pass. The age of rank has arrived. At the Ziggurat's base, you find a group of men and women kneeling before a priest. His robe gleams white in the sunlight, his head shaved smooth, and he carries a staff tipped with copper. He's chanting words you don't understand but can feel, something about divine order and human duty. People respond in murmurs, eyes downcast. It's theater and theology rolled into one. The priest's voice rises.
"The gods have chosen our city!"
The crowd cheers softly. You almost smile. Every city will say this now. Uruk, Kish Lagash, all convinced that their local gods made their mud sacred. Historians still argue whether these early city-states grew peacefully through trade or violently through conquest. Maybe both. What's certain is that each became fiercely proud, fiercely competitive, and fiercely independent. Civilization, it turns out, loves a good rivalry. As the day warms, you find yourself walking alongside a caravan entering the city. Donkeys bray under loads of goods, obsidian from Anatolia, copper from Oman, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan. These merchants have traveled weeks, even months, guided by stars and rumors. The world is beginning to connect itself, one dusty trail at a time. The lead trader, his beard matted and face sunburned, laughs as he speaks to you in broken Sumerian. Uruk buys everything. Uruk sells everything. Uruk is everything. You believe him. The marketplace ahead buzzes like a hive. Clay tablets covered in pictographs lie beside piles of grain. Women barter for wool, Children chase stray dogs. A scribe sits cross-legged behind a low table, marking transactions on wet clay with a stylus made from a reed. You realize something quietly revolutionary. Writing isn't art here. It's accounting. Every wedge pressed into clay represents barley owed, sheep traded, taxes collected. The first written words aren't poems, they're receipts. You walk on. The smell changes. Less bread, more copper. You're near the artisan's quarter. Men hammer metal, spin pottery, carve bone combs and beads. The rhythmic pounding of tools sounds almost musical, echoing off the mud brick walls. Sparks fly. The air feels alive with energy and invention. Then,
A shout? Water?
a small fire breaks out near a kiln, smoke curling skyward. Within moments, neighbors rush in, forming a human chain to pass buckets from a nearby canal. The fire's out before it spreads. You're struck by how instinctively they act together. It's not chaos. It's coordination, a reflex born of necessity. Maybe that's the true heart of civilization. People cooperating because they have no choice. As the sun dips low, the city glows golden. You climb to the Ziggurats' half-finished platform. From here, you can see everything. The canals glittering like veins, the smoke rising from ovens, the people scurrying like ants below. For the first time, humanity looks organized from above. You almost feel like a god yourself, watching creation unfold. But even gods, apparently, have paperwork. Below you, a scribe hurries toward the temple, arms full of clay tablets, muttering something that sounds suspiciously like frustration. The first bureaucrat in history, already late for a meeting. Night descends. Torches flicker. A group of young men gathers near the riverbank, laughing and bragging. You catch fragments. Lagash has more soldiers. Or builds higher walls. Uruk's goddess loves us best. Pride, rivalry, identity, all sprouting like weeds. You can sense wars already growing in the distance. And here's a quirky tidbit for your sleepy mind. Archaeologists have found ancient beer tokens. Tiny clay discs with markings showing how much beer each worker was owed. That means even 5,000 years ago, people got paid in beer. You can almost picture payday. Congratulations! You've built a temple wall! Here's your 6 pence. Humanity hasn't changed much. As you walk back through the narrow alleys, you notice murals painted in red and black. Bulls, stars, rivers, and strange half-human creatures. They're stories without words, prequels to myths that will one day be written down. Somewhere in the distance, a drum starts beating again, steady, calm, eternal. You pass by a house where someone plays a reed flute. The tune wobbles, unsure, but lovely. A mother hums along while cradling her child. You pause, smiling. It's a soft reminder for all the temples and trade. Civilization is still made of small human moments. Music, laughter, love, exhaustion. Finally, you reach the edge of the city. The fields stretch beyond, ghostly under moonlight. You can see other flickering lights far away. Other villages, other cities rising. Each one believes it's the center of the universe. Each one is half right. You lie down on a warm rooftop, head resting on your arm, listening to the distant hum of life below. You can feel the pulse of a world that's beginning to organize itself. Cities with rival gods, rival kings, rival dreams. And even though you know they'll eventually fight, collapse, and be forgotten, tonight, their world feels eternal. The stars shimmer overhead, the same ones that watched you in the marshes. You think about how far you've come, from the reed huts to the first true cities, and how everything ahead, writing, kingship, empire, will grow from this restless soil. The air cools. A distant bull bellows. The ziggurat gleams faintly under the moon. You exhale, slow and deep, as the city murmurs in its sleep. Civilization has begun to dream of itself. The first smell that hits you this morning isn't incense or river clay. It's bread. Warm, nutty, faintly smoky bread, fresh from a clay oven. Someone nearby hums while patting another lump of barley dough flat. A child pokes at the edges, earning a playful slap on the wrist. Smoke curls through a hole in the ceiling, mixing with the golden light pouring through a reed window. You can practically taste the moment's soft bread, cool morning air, a civilization already in motion, before you've even rubbed the sleep from your eyes. You're in a Sumerian kitchen, and honestly, it's kind of cozy. Low ceiling, smooth mud walls, a few baskets of dates and onions, clay pots filled with oil and grain, and a cat that clearly believes it owns the place. Someone stirs a pot bubbling on the hearth. It smells savory and earthy, probably lentils and leeks. You realize you're in the daily rhythm of ancient survival farming, cooking, eating, repeating. But survival, here, isn't boring. It's an art. When you step outside, the fields shimmer in the dawn light. You can see rows of barley stretching toward the horizon, bordered by narrow irrigation ditches. The air is full of sound, croaking frogs, creaking wooden plows, and the rhythmic grunt of oxen. Every day begins the same way, and that sameness is sacred. A mainstream historical fact, barley was the backbone of Sumerian life. It was food, drink, money, and even a unit of measurement. Wages were calculated in gur, or sila, of barley, ancient equivalents of bushels and cups. You could pay your debts in barley, your workers in barley, your priest in barley. If the grain gods ever took a day off, the whole economy would collapse before lunch. You join the farmers trudging through the fields, their feet sinking into soft soil. The sun's barely up, and sweat already glistens on their backs. One man whistles to his oxen, while steering a wooden plow tipped with copper. It's not efficient by modern standards, but it's revolutionary compared to digging by hand. The soil flips, dark and moist. Birds trail behind, pecking for worms. Keep it steady. Someone calls out. The gods love straight lines. You're not sure if that's religion or just good farming advice. Probably both. By midday, the fields hum like an orchestra. Oxen groaning, farmers shouting, water trickling, and the ever-present drone of flies. A woman nearby scatters crushed shells onto the ground. She says it keeps the soil healthy. Another ties bundles of reeds to mark where new irrigation channels will go. Everything here is communal. One person's laziness means everyone's hunger, and hunger is never far away. You sit with a small group for lunch bread, dates, and beer, the Sumerian Holy Trinity. The beer, as always, is thick and sour, more porridge than drink. You sip it through a long reed straw to avoid floating husks. Someone cracks a joke. If the gods wanted us sober, they'd have invented clean water. Everyone laughs. Civilization may be new, but sarcasm is eternal. Between bites, they talk about floods, how last year's was gentle, but the year before ruined half the crop. The men nod gravely. You can feel how tightly their lives are chained to the moods of the rivers. Too much water, and the fields drown. Too little, and they crack to dust. Historians still argue whether these unpredictable floods helped shape the Sumerian worldview. Gods that were powerful, moody, and sometimes terrifying. Maybe when your harvest depends on chaotic forces, you naturally imagine the universe as unpredictable too. The afternoon sun burns hot. You take shelter beneath a date palm, watching shadows ripple across the water. The farmers begin the next phase, threshing and winnowing. They beat bundles of barley against the ground, separating grain from husk, then toss it into the air so the wind can blow the chaff away. It's mesmerizing, golden dust swirling, laughter echoing, the scent of grain filling the air. You feel time slow down. Here's a quirky tidbit. Ancient tablets mention recipes. The Sumerians were among the first people to record how to make food on purpose. There's evidence of stews seasoned with garlic, coriander, and mustard. Comfort food 5,000 years old. If you think your grandmother's cooking has history, try tracing your stew back to Uruk. Evenings are gentler, Families gather in small courtyards, sharing food, gossip, and songs. Someone plays a lyre, a delicate harp-like instrument with strings of twisted gut. The tune is slow, repetitive, oddly soothing. You realize that for these people, relaxation isn't a luxury, it's recovery. Every day's labor could mean life or death, and rest becomes sacred. Children chase one another through the narrow lanes, their feet kicking up dust. A woman calls out to them in a sing-song voice, warning that monsters live in the canals after dark. The kids giggle, pretending to be terrified, but later you notice they stay close to home anyway. Myth, you realize, isn't just entertainment. It's social safety tape. You wander to the edge of the fields again as twilight descends. The sky glows like copper. Workers head home, tools slung over their shoulders. Some lead oxen, others carry baskets of grain balanced on their heads. A few linger to wash in the canals, splashing, laughing, their voices echoing softly. You sit on a low wall and watch fireflies begin to flicker across the fields. It's beautiful. This mix of exhaustion and contentment, of simple routines forming the bones of civilization. Every brick in Uruk, every line of cuneiform, every temple feast. They all rest on this quiet labor, this endless dance between soil and sky. A small group gathers near you to pray. They light a tiny oil lamp and place a handful of grain beside it, an offering to the goddess Nanshi, protector of waters and fertility. Their chant is low, melodic, hypnotic. May the canals stay open. May the floods be kind. May the barley rise tall. You find yourself murmuring along before you even realize it. Later, back in the city, the streets are alive again. Bakers pull steaming loaves from their clay ovens. Merchants shout the day's prices. A scribe sits by a lamp, recording grain totals on a tablet, lines of wedges pressed with calm precision. The city runs on food, but food runs on faith and cooperation. It's a perfect circle. Still, you notice cracks in that circle. A woman complains that her family's portion of water was cut. A man mutters that temple priests took more grain than they gave back. You sense the slow creep of inequality, the gap between those who work and those who manage. Civilization brings abundance, but also hierarchy. You sigh, half amused, half resigned. Humanity's first paperwork problem is already turning into politics. The night cools. You return to the kitchen where you started. The air smells of ashes and bread crust. Someone's singing a lullaby, soft and sweet. The lyrics, roughly translated, mean, "Sleep, little one. The gods have watered the fields." You realize the song is more than comfort. It's reassurance that the fragile system will hold another day. Before you sleep, you take a final look outside. The moon hangs low, pale and enormous. A faint mist rises from the canals. Somewhere far off, a bull bellows, deep and mournful. It feels like the earth itself exhaling after a long day's work. You lie down on your mat, belly full, head heavy with the scent of barley and smoke. The rhythm of farming, cooking, eating. It's all starting to feel like a heartbeat. You close your eyes, and the sound of distant irrigation water lulls you toward dreams. If you listen closely, you can almost hear it. The whisper of civilization settling into habit. The gentle sigh of humanity, realizing that staying still can be as powerful as wandering. Tomorrow, they'll wake again before dawn, bake more bread, plow more soil, pray for mercy, and argue about whose field got the better water. And you'll be right here, drifting between sleep and history, as the first cities feed themselves into forever. You wake to the sound of hammers, not the rhythmic thud of farming tools this time, but the sharper, higher clink of copper on stone. The morning air smells faintly metallic, laced with smoke and the earthy tang of wet clay. When you step outside, the streets hum with energy. Something is being built again, something big. The city feels different today. There's a pulse in the air, like the whole place has collectively decided to make something that will outlast them all. The farmers you met yesterday still work the fields. Yes. But here, inside the heart of Uruk, the real transformation happens. This is no longer a sleepy settlement by a riverbank. It's a living machine of labor, art, and ambition. You are standing in the dawn of architecture. Workers move in coordinated rhythm, their bodies glistening with sweat as they haul giant mud bricks toward a growing structure. Each brick, sun-dried and stamped with the mark of its maker, is both humble and eternal. When you touch one, the clay is warm from the sun and rough beneath your fingertips. You realize you're touching the same material that holds up nearly every Sumerian dream. A scribe nearby is counting loads of bricks. He calls out numbers in a song cadence, each total pressed onto a wet clay tablet with his stylus. This might not look glamorous, but you're watching the first organized labor records in human history. Proof that bureaucracy and construction have been inseparable since day one. A mainstream historical fact, the Sumerians pioneered the use of baked bricks and massive temple platforms called ziggurats. These weren't just pretty piles of dirt. They were spiritual skyscrapers meant to bridge heaven and earth. Each tier climbed closer to the gods, as if the architects were trying to reach their Wi-Fi signal in the sky. The one before you today isn't finished yet, but even half built. It's breathtaking, massive ramps rising layer by layer, supported by timber scaffolds. Hundreds of workers pass clay buckets hand to hand, a human chain snaking up the slope. The air vibrates with chants, orders, and the occasional argument about whose turn it is to rest. You climb a little higher to watch. The foreman, a wary man with skin tanned like old leather, turns to the workers. "This brick," he shouts, holding one up, "is your prayer made solid." And you realize, for the Sumerians, that's exactly what it was. It's not just temples. As you wander the city, you see houses stacked like honeycombs, narrow lanes winding between them. Each home has the same materials: mud brick, reeds, plaster, but a unique pattern of walls and courtyards. Some even have tiny drainage channels. You marvel at that. A civilization that not only built up, but also thought about waste management. Truly revolutionary. Down one alley, a woman is decorating her courtyard wall with clay cones pressed into geometric patterns. They shimmer in the sunlight, reds, whites, and blacks forming triangles and diamonds. Art, here, isn't an afterthought. It's woven into daily life like the reeds in their mats. You pause by a potter's workshop. The rhythmic spin of the potter's wheel catches your eye. Another Sumerian invention that changed the world. The craftsman's hands blur as he shapes a lump of clay into a perfect vessel. The wheel hums softly, steady and hypnotic. Each rotation feels like a heartbeat of progress. He grins when he sees you watching. "The gods love symmetry," he says. You nod, though you're pretty sure the gods also love efficiency. This wheel, after all, made mass production possible long before factories existed. A quirky tidbit: Sumerian builders sometimes mixed bitumen, a natural tar, into their mortar. It smelled awful but worked like ancient super glue. They used it for waterproofing canals, patching boats, even binding the layers of ziggurats. Imagine the world's first construction adhesive, straight from the Earth's crust. By midday, the city echoes with sound. Blacksmiths clang copper tools in workshops that glow like furnaces. Reed boats creak as they load cargo along the canal. In the distance, someone's blowing through a conch shell, signaling another round of workers to switch shifts. Civilization is now running on schedules. You wander toward the temple district. The priests here supervise everything from food offerings to construction to celestial measurements. One priest, draped in wool robes, stands on a platform giving instructions to a group of laborers. His voice rises above the noise. Align it with the stars, not just the street. Historians still argue whether these temple complexes were purely religious or early centers of government. In truth, they were both. A divine bureaucracy wrapped in mud brick. You can practically see the Sumerian version of a city council forming. Scribes tallying supplies, priests approving designs, laborers doing the heavy lifting, while everyone debates celestial alignment. Some things never change. You climb the half-finished ramp again, stopping halfway to catch your breath. Below, Uruk stretches like a maze of sunlit roofs and winding alleys. You can see the canals glittering, the farmlands swaying, the smoke from distant kilns curling upward. From this height, it all looks deliberate, an organized miracle of human stubbornness. A worker beside you grins. One day, he says, "This will touch the sky." You believe him. Because even though you know the ziggurat won't literally reach the heavens, the dream itself already has. Later in the afternoon, the heat turns the mud walls to shimmering gold. A group of boys splash in the canal, pretending to be builders too. One stacks mud clumps. Another knocks them over with dramatic flair. Their laughter bounces off the water, and you smile. You're watching the next generation imitate civilization, one muddy tower at a time. You wander past the harbor, where barges unload cargo. Stone from the north, timber from the mountains, shells from the Gulf. Uruk doesn't just build from its soil, it builds from trade, pulling in resources like a vast, organized organism. You imagine the paperwork behind it all. The scribes' clay tablets, stacking like bricks of their own kind. As evening falls, the work slows. The builders gather to eat, sitting in a circle around a small fire. Their hands are coated in clay dust. Their faces glow in the flickering light. One begins telling a story, a myth about a hero who defied the gods to steal the secret of bricks. Everyone laughs, because it's half ridiculous, half true. Civilization, you realize, is equal parts faith and construction adhesive. You can't have one without the other. When the stars finally appear, they shimmer directly above the rising ziggurat. You notice how perfectly the structure's tiers align with the constellations. Maybe that priest wasn't just being fussy. Maybe this was the Sumerians' way of writing prayers on the skyline. You lie back on a patch of cool earth, gazing upward. The silhouette of the unfinished temple stands against the Milky Way, a stairway of human hope etched in mud. You imagine workers from 1,000 years later climbing it, whispering the same prayers, believing the same stars are listening. The city grows quiet now. Only the faint sounds of frogs and trickling water breaking the silence. You feel oddly proud of these people, as if you helped stack the bricks yourself. You think of tomorrow: more mud, more sweat, more dreams hardened by the sun. But for tonight, Uruk sleeps beneath its newborn skyline. And somewhere, in the soft dark between the stars, maybe the gods smile, half amused, half impressed. At the small creatures who dared to build a home halfway to heaven. The next morning greets you with the smell of clay, ink, and something faintly sweet, like crushed reeds baking in the sun. You stretch, brush the dust from your tunic, and follow the faint clicking sound echoing through the narrow streets. It's not a hammer or a chisel this time. It's sharper, more deliberate. Click, tap tap, pause, click. You turn a corner and find them, the scribes of Uruk, sitting cross-legged in a shaded courtyard. Each one has a damp clay tablet balanced on their knees, and a reed stylus in hand. Their movements are tiny but purposeful, pressing wedge-shaped marks into the surface with rhythmic precision. You've stumbled upon humanity's first paperwork party. This is the dawn of writing. And as you'll soon learn, it's less romantic than you imagined. Hey, you might think writing started with poems or heroic sagas, right? Nope. The earliest Sumerian writing mostly says things like, 3 goats delivered, 1 missing, payment pending. Bureaucracy was humanity's first muse. A mainstream historical fact, the earliest known form of writing, cuneiform, emerged right here in Sumer around 3200 BCE. The name literally means wedge-shaped, describing those neat little impressions in clay. At first, it wasn't language as we know it. It was accounting. Lists, trades, rations, taxes. The poetry came later, after the math was balanced. You crouch beside a young scribe as he works. His brow furrows. His tongue peeks out in concentration. "This one," he says proudly, holding up a tablet. "This for the temple beer rations." You squint. The markings look like tiny bird tracks in wet sand. He grins. "Tomorrow, I'll write the barley records." He says it like a man climbing a career ladder one wedge at a time. Nearby, an older teacher corrects another student. No, he mutters. "That sign means sheep, not cloth. You don't want the priests feeding wool to the flocks again." The students laugh. You do too. Civilization may have invented literacy, but proofreading came immediately after. The courtyard hums with activity. You notice the system. Fresh clay tablets are fetched from a pot of damp earth. Completed ones are set to dry in the sun. Some are stored in reed baskets, labeled with crude symbols. Others are fired in kilns for permanence. You're looking at the first libraries, though instead of shelves of leather, bound volumes, it's piles of baked mud. A quirky tidbit: archaeologists once found a Sumerian tablet that seems to be an ancient student's homework. On one side, the teacher's perfect example. On the other, a shaky, error-filled copy. The teacher even scrawled a note at the bottom that basically says, "Redo this, sloppy work." You can practically hear the world's first frustrated red pen. You wander closer to a small temple storeroom. Inside, clay tokens shaped like animals, jars, and loaves sit in small baskets. These, a priest explains, were used before writing. Merchants once traded them as physical stand-ins for goods, like prehistoric emojis. When someone had the bright idea to press them into clay, cuneiform was born, humanity's first language, born out of laziness and good business sense. As the day warms, you follow the scribes to a larger chamber near the temple. Rows of clay tablets line the walls, each carefully catalogued. The air is cool, still, reverent. You realize you're standing in a sacred space, not of worship, but of record. The priests believed that writing itself was divine. To make a mark that outlives you was to borrow the power of eternity. Historians still argue whether the first scribes were priests, accountants, or both. The truth, you suspect, is that they were hybrids. Half spiritual, half bureaucratic. Proof that the gods and the spreadsheets have always shared an office. You settle onto a bench as one of them begins reading aloud. The tablet in his hands records offerings to the goddess Inanna: oil, wine, grain, and honey. His voice is slow, careful, reverent. It's not a prayer, but it feels like one. Each word lands heavy in the still air. You feel it, the weight of permanence. Outside, a group of traders gathers around a merchant stall. One of them produces a small clay tablet, the ancient world's version of a receipt. He hands it to the merchant, who checks the markings, nods, and passes over a sealed jar of beer. A transaction complete, written into time. You can't help but grin. Somewhere, a accountant just fist pumped. Later that afternoon, you sit with one of the master scribes, an elderly man named Anatom. His fingers are stained with clay dust, his beard streaked with white. "People think we write for the gods," he says softly. "But really, we write for memory. The gods already know everything. It's the humans who forget." You ask him if he believes writing will change the world. He laughs, a low, raspy sound. "It already has. Once you can record what's owed, you can demand it. Once you can write a law, you can enforce it. Once you can write a story, you can shape belief." You sit in silence for a moment, realizing he's right. Writing doesn't just record civilization, it creates it. A student interrupts, bringing him a cracked tablet. "Sir, the surface dried too fast." Anatom sighs, examining it like a broken promise. "Then start again." Nothing is permanent until it's fired. You file that line away in your mind. It feels oddly poetic, maybe even prophetic. The scribes continue working as the light shifts, shadows sliding across their tablets. Some hum quietly to themselves, others mumble words as they inscribe them. The sound becomes hypnotic: click, tap, scrape, a lullaby of bureaucracy. As evening falls, the temple courtyard empties. The day's tablets are stacked neatly in baskets, each labeled with a small clay tag. You help carry one to the archive room. It's heavier than you expect, and you stumble slightly. The scribe laughs. Careful, traveler. That one holds 3 months of barley taxes. You wince. Then it's heavier than it looks. You place it on a shelf, noticing the faint impressions of fingerprints hardened into its surface. You trace one with your thumb. It's a strange, intimate moment. Touching the print of someone who lived 5,000 years ago, who may have grumbled about deadlines just like you. Outside, the night smells of baked clay and oil lamps. The scribes light torches, illuminating the courtyard in warm gold. You hear them chatting softly, debating symbols and grammar over bowls of beer. Civilization's first literary circle. A young apprentice approaches you, grinning. Do you want to try? He hands you a small lump of clay and a reed stylus. You hesitate, then press the first wedge. It's harder than it looks. Your lines are uneven. Your spacing terrible. The apprentice snorts. Don't worry, he says. Nobody reads the first draft. You can't help but laugh. The sentence you write means nothing, a jumble of half-learned signs, but the feeling is electric. The first act of making a mark, of saying, I was here. When the torches burn low, the scribes begin to pack up. You linger, staring at the rows of drying tablets. Each one a whisper from the past to the future, hoping someone, someday, will listen. You finally head home under the stars, your fingers still dusted with clay. The night feels quiet, almost reverent. Somewhere behind you, the last scribe seals a jar full of tablets and tucks it into a wall recess for safekeeping. You wonder if it will still be there in 5,000 years, and if someone like you will find it, reading those same wedge-shaped marks and feeling this same flicker of awe. You smile to yourself, whispering, nothing is permanent until it's fired. And in the stillness of the Sumerian night, with the clay drying gently in the moonlight, it feels like the world has just learned how to remember itself. By the time the next dawn seeps over the Ziggurats' dusty tiers, the city is already murmuring with another kind of rhythm. Not hammers or plows this time, but bartering voices. The soft clink of copper scales, the bleat of goats being traded, the slap of sandals across reed mats. Uruk is awake again, and this time, it's thinking in silver and barley instead of prayers. You stretch, brush a bit of dust from your clothes, and step into the marketplace. The air smells alive, a blend of baked bread, hot clay, fresh fish from the canals, and a hint of donkey. A wide square stretches before you, buzzing with movement. Stalls shaded by woven reed canopies line both sides, and the chatter feels like a river of sound.
Dates!
Sweet dates from the south. Copper tools. Best edge you'll find. Fine wool, soft as the goddess's breath. You grin. The Sumerians may have invented writing and ziggurats, but here's the invention that kept everything running: trade. Without it, there'd be no cities, no scribes, no beer rations. Civilization would grind to a very dusty halt. A mainstream historical fact. Sumer was one of the first true trading economies in the world. They didn't have forests or metal mines, but they had ambition. So they swapped grain and textiles for copper from Oman, timber from Lebanon, gold from Egypt, and lapis lazuli all the way from Afghanistan. The world's first global supply chain, minus the shipping containers, plus a few more donkeys. You weave between the stalls, brushing past merchants with sunburned faces and calloused hands. One of them grins, waving you over. Fine wool for your wife, he says. You hesitate. I don't have a wife, he shrugs. Then buy it now. Better to have the wool ready. You laugh and move on. The ground beneath your feet is packed hard from centuries of footsteps. Every grain of dust has probably been traded a dozen times by now. You stop at a stall where a woman is weighing barley on a small copper scale. She pours grain from a basket into a clay bowl until both sides balance perfectly. Fair weight, she says proudly. Her scales are calibrated with little pebbles of standardized size. You realize you're watching the first flickers of economic regulation. Ancient quality control, no less. Next to her, a merchant scribbles on a small clay tablet the buyer's name, the amount, the price. When he hands it over, the buyer stamps it with a personal seal. A carved cylinder rolled across the wet clay, leaving intricate designs of animals and gods. You recognize the pattern instantly. This is the Sumerian signature, their version of a contract, notarized and legally binding. A quirky tidbit, some seals doubled as jewelry. People wore them around their necks or wrists, partly as ID, partly as status symbols. Imagine walking around with your tax records dangling from your necklace. Sumerians did it with style. You pause at a spice merchant's stall. The air is thick with strange scents: coriander, sesame, garlic, and a faint whiff of imported incense. He winks as you inhale deeply. From Dilmun, he says, referring to a faraway land on the Arabian coast. Took 3 moons to arrive. You whistle softly. That's a long supply line for a handful of scent. Historians still argue whether these trade routes were permanent or seasonal. But as you listen to the merchant haggle, you realize that trade wasn't just about goods. It was about gossip, ideas, and stories. Every caravan brought rumors along with cargo: new gods, new inventions, new scandals from distant cities. Civilization's first newsfeed. Running on foot and boat, you make your way toward the docks. The canal shimmers in the sun, alive with movement. Reed boats glide along the water, some piled high with cargo fish, baskets of grain, jars of oil sealed with bitumen caps. Dockworkers shout to one another as they unload goods, their muscles slick with sweat. Each jar gets inspected, counted, recorded. Even the water smells of industry, mud, oil, and ambition. A young boy splashes near the edge, trying to catch a fish with a woven trap. His father calls to him, "Careful! That's not just water. That's our road." You smile at the truth of it. In Sumer, rivers were more than lifelines. They were the highways of history. You walk along the bank until you spot a small group of merchants arguing over a shipment of copper. One insists the ingots are short weight. Another swears the priest's scales are cursed. The tension builds until a scribe steps forward, stylus in hand. "Show me your records," he says calmly. And just like that, the power of writing settles the dispute. Numbers, not fists, rule here. Civilization in action. You spend the afternoon wandering deeper into the bazaar. You pass a jeweler hammering tiny beads of lapis lazuli into a necklace. A brewer pours frothy beer into clay mugs for thirsty traders. A child sells tiny clay figurines of bulls, lions, and, your favorite, a very unimpressed looking god with one eyebrow raised. Someone tugs your sleeve. A wiry man with bright eyes and ink-stained fingers offers you a tablet. "It's a new poem," he says. "About trade." You raise an eyebrow. "Trade poetry." He grins. "Of course. What else is worth singing about?" You read the marks aloud slowly, haltingly. It's a hymn to the god Enki, thanking him for opening the rivers so the boats could flow and the city could thrive. The rhythm is steady, almost like a chant. You realize that somewhere between accounting and art, writing found its soul. As the sun dips low, the market begins to close. Merchants cover their goods with mats. Buyers drift toward taverns and food stalls. The hum fades into laughter, music, and the occasional hiccup from someone who's enjoyed a bit too much barley beer. You sit near a small stall selling roasted onions and flatbread. The cook hands you a piece, still steaming. It tastes earthy and sweet, with a hint of salt from the river air. You chew slowly, watching as the last boats tie up for the night. Behind you, a merchant argues good-naturedly with a priest about tomorrow's taxes. A group of women share gossip over jars of beer. Somewhere a flute begins to play, a thin, haunting tune that rises and falls with the breeze. You can almost hear the heartbeat of Uruk in its steady, layered, endlessly repeating. The cook sits beside you, wiping sweat from his brow. "You're new," he says. "You came from far, didn't you?" You nod. "Far enough." He chuckles. "Doesn't matter. Everyone's from somewhere else here." Uruk eats strangers and makes them family. The phrase lingers with you. You watch the lights flicker along the water, the city breathing softly under its canopy of stars. For the first time, you see how the pieces fit together. Fields, temples, scribes, merchants, all feeding one another in perfect rhythm. Civilization isn't just walls and gods, you realize. It's trade routes and scales, contracts and promises, the daily friction of people exchanging what they have for what they need. Every deal, every handshake, every argument about shortweight copper, each one a tiny pulse keeping the great heart of Sumer alive. As the night deepens, you lean back against a warm clay wall and close your eyes. The marketplace is quiet now, just the occasional creak of a boat, or the whisper of a merchant counting coins in the dark. You imagine tomorrow will sound the same. Barley rustling, scales tipping, voices rising and falling in that endless negotiation between survival and ambition. You smile to yourself, half asleep. The city hums around you, full of unspoken deals and dreams. And somewhere in the quiet, the gods of commerce probably smile too, because they know that once humans learned to trade, there was no going back. You wake again in the warm shimmer of the city, where clay tablets pile higher than bricks, and the smell of baked mud mingles with reed smoke. You've walked past temples and markets before, but tonight the real hum is quieter, tucked in behind every shop, every field, every tax list. This is Sumer's true miracle, not its temples or its gods, but its paperwork. You, sleepy traveler, are about to wander into the very birth of bureaucracy. Try not to yawn too loudly. Somewhere, an ancient accountant is still tallying barley rations. You see him now, sitting cross-legged, stylus poised, squinting under a flickering oil lamp. Each small wedge on his tablet is a sound, a number, or an order. He isn't just writing, he's managing. Every field, every sheep, every jug of oil that belongs to the temple must be accounted for. And it's oddly soothing, this rhythm of dots and wedges. You can almost hear the clack of clay against clay as tablets stack into tidy archives. It's the ancient version of checking your email, except the inbox is literal stone. Historians still argue whether this avalanche of record keeping began as religious devotion or raw economic necessity. Maybe both. You can picture the priests muttering about divine order, while the scribes silently calculate grain surpluses. Order is holy, but also handy when someone's stealing temple beer. You step into the storeroom. Shelves of baked tablets glowing red in torchlight. It's not just bookkeeping, it's control. Someone realized that writing means you can project power across space and time. You can tell a farmer what to deliver without ever leaving your chair. You can define who owes what, who belongs where. Even debts can outlive the people who made them. But bureaucracy has its quirks too. There's an early tablet recording an argument about missing fish rations. Maybe the world's first HR complaint. Another describes a clerk punished for carelessness with seals. You imagine him nervously sweating as his superior, maybe a priestly accountant, rolls out a cylinder seal like a boss brandishing a signature stamp. The seal itself, carved with tiny patterns, rolled over wet clay, acts like a security code. Without it, your transaction isn't real. Even the gods, it seems, love a good authentication system. Now, let's wander down the hall. The hum of voices grows. A crowd waits to hear proclamations. A list of new rules, shouted by a herald. Sumer's early laws are being tested and codified. One says if a builder's house collapses and kills someone, the builder himself will be executed. Brutal. Yes. But it's also about accountability. Civilization means someone gets blamed when the roof falls in. And here's a thought to stir your drowsy mind. This was all done without paper, without pens, without any alphabet as we know it. Every idea had to be impressed into wet clay before it dried in the sun. Drop your tablet, and it's not a file error. It's a shattered afternoon of work. In one room, a young scribe studies the signs for barley, sheep, and silver. He recites them under his breath. You sense his ambition. Literacy is rare, powerful. He can read the city's secrets. In modern terms, he's both the coder and the data analyst of his time. You might even say he's the first office worker. Poor guy. You pass shelves stacked with tablets describing rations for laborers digging canals. 10 liters of barley beer per day for a foreman, 5 for the crew. Everyone's compensation is written, verified, and stamped. There's comfort in it. A sense that fairness can be baked into clay. But also dread the same clay that promises justice can record debt, tax, and punishment. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some tablets show teachers scolding students for lazy handwriting. Yes, ancient report cards existed. A line might read, "You did not sit properly. You did not write neatly. You spoke in class." Imagine being grounded in 2500 BCE. The punishment. More writing practice. Honestly, it hasn't changed much. The city's bureaucracy keeps expanding. You watch clerks measure fields with ropes, draw little plans, and record boundaries. Disputes are settled with tablets as evidence. Land doesn't belong to who holds it, but to whose name is inscribed in clay. You can almost hear the shuffle of sandals in dusty offices, the sighs of overworked scribes who dream of early retirement, which, in their case, probably means dying slightly richer than the average farmer. There's a deeper rhythm under all of it. The collective heartbeat of a civilization learning to count itself. To make sense of thousands of people working, trading, worshipping, arguing. Without these bureaucratic habits, the temples couldn't function, trade couldn't scale, kings couldn't rule. It's both marvel and monotony. The birthplace of civilization and the birthplace of paperwork hell. But let's zoom out, drift upward like a lazy desert breeze. From above, the whole city looks like an anthill made of mud and order. Every tablet, every list, every seal creates invisible lines that bind the city together. The Sumerians didn't invent empathy or love. They invented something colder, but incredibly durable systems. You drift back down into the archive again, and there's a strange hush. The last scribe of the day smooths fresh clay, writes a few final signs, and blows gently to dry it. Tomorrow, another will pick up the same stylus, write the same signs, keep the same ledgers. The wheel of record turns endlessly, like time itself. You might smile at the thought. People building a world from mud and math. Historians still debate whether this bureaucratic revolution came before the state or because of it. Maybe the need to manage resources created kings. Or maybe kings invented resources so they could be managed. Either way, you're inside the machine now, listening to its slow, hypnotic hum. The clay glows faintly, and you can almost imagine the whispers of data drifting through the centuries. Every transaction, every name, every tiny complaint preserved by accident of heat and earth. Modern archaeologists uncover them, brush away the dust, and realize this isn't just administration. It's memory itself, fossilized. Civilization is remembering together, and bureaucracy, for all its dullness, is the skeleton that holds that memory up. You breathe in the dusty scent of old clay, the ghost of inkless writing. Somewhere a temple bell rings softly, signaling the end of the working day. The scribes stretch, yawn, and tuck their styluses into their belts. The tablets cool, the lamps dim, and you can feel the city drifting towards sleep. You too, perhaps, have earned your rest. After all, you've just survived another day in the world's first office. You wake to the smell of baking bread and wet clay again. Only this time, the streets feel quieter. The frantic rush of markets and scribes fades into something more intimate. You're about to slip through the narrow alleys of Sumerian daily life. Homes, courtyards, kitchens, and the soft hum of domestic survival. Civilization, for all its gods and kings, is mostly built on the rhythm of ordinary days. And you can almost feel that pulse now. The heartbeat of home. The houses are squat, built of mud brick, arranged around inner courtyards where light spills in like honey. You walk past doorways draped with reed mats. Inside, it smells faintly of roasted barley and animal dung. An oddly cozy perfume of survival. A small hearth flickers. A woman grinds grain with a stone pestle. The sound steady, hypnotic. Every turn of her hand echoes the unrecorded lives of thousands before her. Historians still argue whether these homes were owned by extended families or smaller nuclear ones. But the walls seem to remember everyone, crowded together in this soft, earthen glow. You notice how close everything feels. No privacy really, just shared breath and whispered gossip. You pass a child chasing a goat, laughing, a dog barking, a pot boiling over. This isn't a museum tableau, it's life, vibrant and messy. Civilization might be written on clay tablets, but it's lived between bites of bread and sips of beer. Beer, by the way, is breakfast, not the bubbly kind. A thick, soupy brew made from barley mash. You drink it through a straw, because floating bits of grain are, well, less pleasant to chew. Everyone drinks it, even kids, because water can be risky. You might grimace, but honestly, it's safer than that canal sludge you saw yesterday. You're offered a bowl of stew. Lentils, maybe, with bits of onion and garlic. A dab of salt is precious, it tastes like trade itself. The cook, smiling, wipes sweat from her brow. Her arms are strong. Survival has made her a quiet athlete. Nearby, an old man mends a sandal, muttering about how his son doesn't respect the gods or the price of leather. Some things never change. The family's day follows the sun. At dawn, chores begin. Animals fed, fields checked, water fetched. By noon, the heat presses down like a heavy lid. People retreat indoors, walls cool against their backs. Children play dice or carve little clay figures. Maybe idols, maybe toys. Archaeologists still debate which is which. It's strangely comforting to know that 4,000 years later, scholars are still arguing about what counts as play. When night falls, the roof becomes the living room. Families climb ladders, spread mats, and talk under the stars. You can almost hear the low murmur of conversation. Stories about temple taxes, rumors about floods, jokes about the neighbor's goat. The laughter sounds old and familiar. Civilization, at heart, is the art of complaining together. Now step softly. You're entering a home of a wealthier family. The layout's similar, but the details whisper status. The bricks are smoother, the jars larger, the decorations carved with symbols of luck and fertility. A servant pours water over her mistress's hands, catching it in a basin. There's jewelry, beads of lapis lazuli, imported from far Afghanistan. The blue glimmers even in dim lamplight, like a fragment of the sky trapped in clay. You wander through rooms stacked with stored grain and jars of oil. This isn't luxury so much as insurance. Wealth measured in what can keep you alive during bad harvests. The master of the house keeps clay tablets here. 2. Family records, trade deals, small debts owed. Bureaucracy trickles into private life. Even home has its paperwork. There's a curious hum to this society, neither free nor fully bound. Women in Sumer can own property, run businesses, even lend money. Some serve as priestesses with real authority. Yet most live within layers of expectation, their labor invisible, but indispensable. You see one woman at her loom, weaving wool into fine cloth. The pattern repeats endlessly, an ancient kind of meditation. A quirky fact: one surviving tablet records a wife complaining that her husband drinks too much beer and neglects his field. The world's oldest domestic dispute, immortalized in mud. Somewhere, a modern couple is probably arguing over the same thing. The children, meanwhile, play in the dust. Some are lucky. Sons of scribes or merchants, learning to read. Others learn through muscle, how to plant, hurt, or haul. You watch one boy carefully copy wedge marks into the sand, pretending he's a scribe. His sister helps, giggling, until a parent scolds them for wasting daylight. Childhood ends early here. Civilization doesn't pause for nap time. Now imagine night again. The city hums like a living creature. Temple chants in the distance, dogs barking, a baby crying. You lie on a rooftop mat, watching faint stars through the haze of hearth smoke. Someone strums a lyre, notes soft and haunting. Maybe the song's about love, maybe about a flood. Even then, music was how people talked to the dark. Historians still argue whether Sumerians felt individuality, as we do. The tablets are quiet on emotion, loud on grain and gods. Yet here, in this small domestic world, you can sense love. In the way someone places a bowl, folds a blanket, or whispers a name before sleep. Maybe civilization doesn't begin with writing at all. Maybe it begins with caring who gets the warm spot by the fire. The next morning, you wake to clatter. Someone sweeping, someone stirring a pot, someone shouting about missing bread. The day begins again, predictable and human. You catch your reflection in a jug of water, dusty, tired, oddly content. Maybe the Sumerians felt that, too, the satisfaction of order, the comfort of repetition. A merchant passes, calling out his wares, fish from the river, dates from the palm groves, clay lamps freshly fired. Life here is fragile, but full. Every household depends on every other, on the farmer's grain, the potter's jars, the fisherman's catch. That invisible web of interdependence is the true architecture of the city. And still, somewhere, someone's arguing. Maybe about land boundaries, maybe about borrowed tools. You grin. Bureaucracy, law, and order all begin here. But gossip and grievance are their beating heart. Civilization, for all its grandness, is mostly people figuring out how not to kill each other before dinner. The air cools again. The last light fades from mud brick walls. A mother hums softly to a baby. You feel your eyelids grow heavy. The world outside may be filled with kings, wars and gods. But here, in the small circle of lamplight and family, civilization survives one quiet evening at a time. And somewhere, maybe on a roof not far from here, someone else lies awake, staring at the stars, wondering if tomorrow will bring rain or taxes or joy, and realizing, as you do now, that history is just a collection of ordinary nights, stacked gently atop one another like bricks of sun-baked clay. You wake again to the shimmer of dawn spilling across rooftops, soft gold brushing the mud brick, catching the edge of every pot and wheel. The city stretches, yawns, and begins its daily concert of hammering, shouting, splashing, clattering. Today, you'll walk among Sumer's makers, the inventors, tinkerers, potters, and smiths who quietly turn survival into innovation. Because civilization doesn't just rise from temples and kings. It grows from calloused hands and curious minds. You start in the potter's quarter. The air here is earthy and hot, filled with the smell of clay and smoke. You can hear the steady whir of something miraculous, a wheel spinning. It looks simple, but it's revolutionary. A round slab of stone, balanced on a spindle, turning with perfect rhythm as a craftsman's hands shape the clay. The potter's wheel. Maybe the single most practical invention in human history. He presses his fingers into the spinning lump, drawing it upward. Thinner, steadier, symmetrical. You feel almost hypnotized. The idea of rotation, of circular motion, has just entered human consciousness. Historians still argue whether the wheel began here for pottery or for transport. Either way, it's a perfect metaphor. Civilization itself turning forward one careful revolution at a time. Behind you, rows of drying pots catch the sunlight. Each will hold grain oil, beer, or perfume. Their curves are like fingerprints of an age that's finally discovered precision. A cracked pot is a disaster. A good one is wealth. You can almost smell the trade routes opening with every turn of that wheel. Further down the street, a blacksmith hammers copper on an anvil of stone. Sparks fly, orange, sharp, mesmerizing. You watch molten metal being poured into molds. It's soft now, but soon it will harden into tools, ornaments, weapons. The world is shifting from stone to metal. This is the dawn of the Bronze Age. Copper alloyed with tin to create something tougher, more durable. The Sumerians might not grasp the chemistry, but they understand magic when they see it. A quirky historical tidbit. Some early smiths were buried with their tools, as if metalworking itself were sacred. You can see why. There's something godlike about shaping earth into something strong enough to change lives. The first plows, chisels, and spearheads are born from fire. You stand there, the heat licking your face, and you realize this is the sound of progress. A rhythmic clang echoing through time. You wander on, following the trail of invention. The streets hum with ingenuity. A craftsman demonstrates a pulley made from ropes and reeds. Another sharpens bronze blades used to cut reeds for boat making. Someone is testing a wheeled cart. Two solid discs attached to an axle. The cart creaks forward, slow but steady. Children chase after it, laughing. They don't know they're witnessing a technological leap that will carry empires. Historians still argue whether the wheel first carried goods or gods. Temples often used them for ritual processions. Rolling sacred statues through the city streets. You imagine the crowd cheering as a gilded chariot passes. An ancient version of a parade float, powered by divine endorsement and good craftsmanship. Next, you find the weaver's courtyard. Looms fill the space, vertical frames with taut strings of wool. Women pull the shuttle back and forth, their hands moving faster than thought. The rhythm of weaving is steady, hypnotic, the heartbeat of the household economy. Every thread connects to trade, to ritual, to beauty. The finished cloth might become a priest's robe or a merchant's export. Nearby, a tanner scrapes hides, muttering to himself. The smell is eye-watering, but the leather he makes will become sandals, straps, shields. You realize that every craft, no matter how grimy, holds civilization together. It's all interdependent. Potters need farmers' grain to barter. Farmers need smiths' plows. Smiths need traders to fetch tin. And speaking of trade, a caravan passes through the city gates just as the morning heat swells. Donkeys laden with sacks and jars plod forward. From their packs spill glittering lapis shells, timber, spices. You taste dust and distance. The wheel and the ledger, those twin inventions, have turned barter into economy. Now pause and look around. You'll notice every wall, every street corner bears traces of innovation. Irrigation channels lined with baked brick, rope made from date, palm fiber. Even the humble door hinge has improved, wooden pivots set into stone sockets. It's like the city itself is inventing efficiency, one hinge at a time. You step into a small workshop where an artisan carves a delicate cylinder seal. The design, a tiny procession of gods and animals, will be rolled onto clay to mark ownership. It's a miniature masterpiece, smaller than your thumb but carrying immense authority. You might call it the first signature, or perhaps the world's earliest logo. Don't blink, you think. This is branding 4,000 years early. The artisan smiles faintly, unaware that his creation will one day sit in a museum under glass, admired by people who've forgotten how to make anything with their hands. You move on to the docks. Boats made of bundled reeds float on the slow, brown water. Men push them with long poles, carrying baskets of grain and jars of oil. Some are shaped like shallow bowls, perfect for the calm canals. Others, bigger and sturdier, venture downstream to meet the great trade routes toward the sea. You can smell tar, salt, and adventure. A small boy splashes nearby, chasing fish with a net. His father yells that he'll scare them all away. The boy laughs. You smile. The human instinct to tinker, to try, to create, runs deep. Maybe one day, he'll build something better than a net. There's another curious little detail historians love. Early Sumerians made cosmetic jars with intricate lids that fit perfectly. Some even had sliding mechanisms. It wasn't just function, it was finesse. Civilization wasn't only about survival, it was about style. Even 5,000 years ago, people wanted nice things. Now you find yourself in the middle of a construction site. Workers pass baskets of mud brick, one to another, singing to keep the rhythm. Each brick is stamped with a mark, the name of the ruler who ordered it. You run your hand along the cool wall rising before you. Every inch of the city is built not just from labor, but from innovation. Stronger kilns, better mortar, improved drainage. The foreman shouts an order.
Faster, before the sun melts us!
You grin. Deadlines, workplace stress, the oldest inventions of all. You follow a worker to a shed filled with strange tools. Hooks, chisels, reed pens, clay molds. Each one a whisper of human problem solving. Here, someone discovered how to make copper harder by hammering it. There, another figured out how to draw straight lines with taut cords. Science wasn't born in a laboratory. It was born here, in sweat and curiosity. Historians still debate whether the Sumerians understood abstract science or just stumbled forward pragmatically. But you suspect that's the same thing. Every discovery begins as an accident noticed by someone who refuses to shrug it off. The sun sets now, turning everything bronze. You walk slowly, watching the craftspeople finish their day. The potter covers his wheel. The smith lets his fire die to embers. The weaver hangs her last thread. You can feel the satisfaction in the air, a quiet triumph in making something that lasts beyond today. Somewhere, a philosopher, priest will claim credit for advancing civilization. But deep down, you know the truth. It's the builders, the tinkerers, the people who couldn't stop asking, what if? That really pushed humanity forward. You pause at the river's edge, the city's lights flickering behind you. The reflection ripples like molten copper. A cart creaks by, wheels squealing faintly. And you smile. Such a small invention, yet it carries the world. Maybe progress doesn't happen in leaps at all. Maybe it hums quietly in corners, shaped by tired hands, fueled by necessity, perfected by patience. And maybe tonight, as you drift towards sleep, the rhythm of those turning wheels still echoes in your mind. A lullaby of motion, of creation, of a species learning that the future can be built one revolution at a time. The sun sets again over Sumer, and this time you don't follow the merchants or the smiths. You drift instead toward the quiet glow of lamplight in temple courtyards and schoolrooms, toward the sound of voices rising and falling in rhythm. Tonight, you're stepping into something less tangible than brick or bronzy stories. You move through the city's narrow lanes until you reach a wide courtyard. Its floor cool under your bare feet. A group of boys sits cross-legged, styluses in hand, copying lines from a tablet their teacher holds. He chants the words, they repeat them, their voices blending into a kind of hum. The clay bears signs that don't just count sheep or grain. These signs form sentences, meaning, imagination. Somewhere in this chorus, literature is being born. You settle down in the corner, half listening, half dreaming. The text they copy is old already. A hymn to Inanna, the goddess of love and war. The teacher's tone is melodic, almost musical. Lady of the heavens. He recites, riding upon the fierce storm. You feel the words sink into you like slow rain. The Sumerians weren't just inventors of cities, they were inventors of poetry. Historians still argue whether the earliest written stories came from oral songs or temple chants. Either way, the line between report and story begins to blur. You can almost hear the moment when some anonymous scribe realizes that words don't have to serve accounting. They can serve memory, longing, awe. Later, you find yourself in another corner of the city. A priest kneels before a small altar, whispering invocations. He's not reading, he's remembering. His chant tells of gods who built the world, fought monsters, flooded the land, and returned in dreams. The myths feel vast and familiar. There's a god of wind, a goddess of fertility, a hero who journeys across rivers of death to find immortality. The names flicker. Enlil, Inanna, Utu, Enki. You can almost feel them circling you in the warm dark, like constellations of meaning before the stars even have names. And then, one night, someone writes it all down. A collection of tablets begins to form, stories of creation, kings, and cosmic floods. Among them is a tale that will outlive empires, the Epic of Gilgamesh. You wander into the story as if it were a dream. You see the great walls of Uruk rising, smell the dust of construction, hear the distant roar of the Euphrates. A king named Gilgamesh, part divine, part man, rules restlessly, hungry for meaning. You watch him meet Enkidu, the wild man raised by animals. Their friendship feels modern, complicated, real. They fight monsters, defy gods, and seek immortality. You know how it ends, with loss, grief, acceptance. Yet somehow it feels less like tragedy and more like recognition. Humanity, for the first time, looks at itself and whispers, "So that's what we are." You imagine the scribe who etched those lines. Hunched, focused, aware he's shaping something greater than myth. Each wedge, mark is an act of defiance against forgetting. The clay tablets may crumble, but the story refuses to die. A quirky little fact. One fragment of Gilgamesh was found reused as construction material. A literal piece of literature stuffed into a wall. Civilization, apparently, recycles even its masterpieces. Yet that accident is why we still know the story at all. You drift among other stories too. Poems about shepherd gods, hymns to grain goddesses, fables of talking trees and boastful rivers. There's one about a pickaxe that speaks.
Yes.
Really, and another about beer being invented by divine mistake. Somewhere, a Sumerian bard might be chuckling over his own cleverness. Language here is power. Every scribe is also a performer. Reading aloud, he gives breath to clay. The audience sways, murmuring approval. This isn't entertainment. It's ritual. Memory and identity fused together. When people hear the old stories, they remember who they are, and why the floods come, and why love hurts. Storytelling keeps the world stitched together. Historians still argue whether Sumerian myths were the first religion, or just political theater in disguise. But as you listen, it doesn't feel cynical. The gods seem flawed, impulsive, human. Reflections of the people who invented them. Maybe religion and psychology began at the same campfire. Now, wander deeper into the archives. A scribe shows you a different kind of tablet, not myth, not law, but something stranger: proverbs. Short, witty lines scratched into clay, the ancient equivalent of memes. One says, "A scribe without a tablet is like a warrior without a weapon." Another warns, "He who has silver is happy, he who has grain is truly blessed." There's even one that reads, "The poor man is better off dead." You blink. Ancient sarcasm lives on. In another room, a priestess records a lament. A dirge for a ruined city, its walls fallen, its people scattered. Her voice is low and trembling. "My heart is clay," she sings. "My tears are salt." The line hits you harder than expected. The emotional literacy here feels timeless. Maybe sadness is the oldest language. You step outside again, where children are gathered around an old storyteller. He's not literate, his words come from memory. The kids lean forward as he describes the god Enki, who tricks other deities with clever inventions. The man's hands move dramatically, his voice deepens for the monsters, softens for the lovers. You can see how myth spreads, not just through clay, but through breath and rhythm. A stray thought crosses your drowsy mind. Every civilization, even ours, lives or dies by its stories. Sumer gave us more than writing, it gave us narrative. The ability to make meaning from chaos. When the floods came, when wars broke cities, people didn't just record losses, they turned them into lessons. That's what stories do. They turn pain into pattern. And you, sitting here in the dust, start to realize how much of yourself still belongs to them. Every bedtime story, every movie, every whispered prayer, all descendants of these first attempts to speak the infinite aloud. A breeze stirs, and the stars blink awake above Uruk. Someone nearby hums a melody. Maybe the same one from 1,000 years ago. The air smells faintly of incense and damp clay. You could almost fall asleep right here, listening to the murmur of stories wrapping around the city like a blanket. You glance once more at the tablet of Gilgamesh, still resting under lamplight. The clay glows faintly red, as if it remembers the heat that baked it. You trace a wedge with your finger. The first human attempt to capture what it feels like to lose a friend, to fear death, to want more time. That ache hasn't changed. Maybe that's the real legacy of Sumer, not the walls, or the wheels, or even the writing, but this quiet human need to be remembered, to speak across centuries and say, "I was here." You lie back, eyes half closed, and the story keeps whispering. The city fades into shadow. The gods, the heroes, the poets, all still speaking, all still alive in the hum of imagination that never stopped turning. Morning rises again over the land between two rivers. The same soft gold of sun, the same lazy curls of smoke from clay hearths. And yet, something has changed. You followed the Sumerians through their temples, laws, poems, and inventions. But now you begin to sense something else stirring under the surface, the slow unraveling of their world. Civilizations, like stories, have arcs. And Sumer's arc is beginning to bend. You start in the city of the richest of them all, where silver and lapis still gleam on temple walls. The Ziggurat towers over the plain like a mountain of baked earth, its summit lost in morning mist. From a distance, it still looks eternal. But up close, you notice cracks. In the plaster, in the order, in the spirit of the people themselves. The farmers still sow barley, but the soil isn't what it used to be. The ancient canals have carried not just water but salt, slow, invisible, and deadly. You dip your fingers into the irrigation ditch and taste it brine. The fields shimmer in strange pale streaks. Crops that once grew thick and tall now struggle to sprout at all. Generations of abundance have poisoned their own foundation. You follow a wary farmer as he loads his meager harvest. He mutters, half to himself, half to the gods. "The water has turned against us," he says. But no god answers. The priests in awe keep chanting, but their hymns feel thinner now, like smoke that won't rise. Beyond the fields, political storms brew. Sumer was never one single empire. It was a mosaic of proud, jealous city-states. Uruk, Lagash, Kish, each claiming divine favor, each convinced the others are corrupt. Their kings build alliances one season and wage war the next. The same canals that carried barley and wine now carry soldiers. You pass through a city gate and see the bodies of men who died not from famine or flood, but from ambition. The banners of different cities flutter beside the same corpses. You realize progress always walks hand in hand with rivalry. And then, from the north, new names begin to appear. Akkad, Sargon, a ruler with eyes like flint and a dream too big for borders. The rise of Akkad feels like the next chapter of Sumer story, or its sequel, depending on your mood. Sargon of Akkad unites the warring cities under one crown around 2334 BCE. And for the first time in history, a single empire stretches across Mesopotamia. The Sumerian kings, the city-states, the old gods of local shrines, all are drawn into his orbit. At first, it feels glorious. Roads are built. Trade expands. Soldiers march with precision and pride. Sumerian scribes still keep their jobs, their tablets now filled with imperial decrees instead of temple accounts. The writing evolves. Faster, sleeker, more uniform. The Sumerian language, though, begins to fade. Akkadian, a cousin tongue from the north, becomes the new voice of power. You can almost hear the shift in the air, like a melody slipping into a different key. It happens quietly at first. Scribes start writing in both languages, Sumerian for sacred things, Akkadian for everything else. Within a few centuries, Sumerian is no longer spoken, only read. It becomes a language of scholars, of ritual, of memory. The living tongue turns to dust, preserved in clay. But even as the language dies, the ideas survive. The wheel turns on. The cuneiform script is adopted by the Akkadians, then by the Babylonians, then by the Assyrians. The flood myths are retold, the laws rewritten, the gods renamed. Civilization doesn't vanish, it mutates. Sumer doesn't end. It dissolves into everything that comes after. Still, part of you lingers in the ruins. You stand at the edge of a once grand temple courtyard, now cracked and half buried in wind-blown sand. The ziggurat of looms behind you, its stairs eroded but still defiant. You imagine a priestess standing there thousands of years ago, her voice raised to the heavens. "O gods, do not abandon us." You wonder if she felt the same quiet dread that modern people feel when something old and beautiful begins to slip away. Archaeologists would later find her lament etched in clay. The storm took the city. The gods fled from their shrines, and we wept for the house that had been our life. It's the oldest elegy on record. The first recorded heartbreak of a civilization. As you walk away from the ruins, the wind picks up, scattering grains of sand that whisper across the stones. You realize these ruins aren't dead. They're breathing history, whispering it into every generation willing to listen. Centuries will pass. Empires will rise and fall. Babylon will rise on Sumer's bones, then Assyria, then Persia. But if you listen closely, you can still hear echoes of Sumer in all of them. In their laws, their architecture, their myths, their writing, their stubborn belief that humans can organize chaos into meaning. You picture a future scholar, maybe 5,000 years from now, brushing dust from a broken tablet, squinting at the wedge marks, reading aloud the first words ever written. He'll smile and think, this is where it began. And he'll be right. Because Sumer was never just a place. It was a blueprint. For cities, for stories, for civilization itself. You sit in the twilight beside what was once the Euphrates. The stars are out again, clear and sharp, reflected in the slow black water. Somewhere nearby, a jackal cries, and the sound feels ancient. You close your eyes and imagine the first farmer planting seeds here. The first scribe pressing stylus into clay. The first poet looking up at the same stars and wondering if the gods were listening. You realize that's the inheritance Sumer left you, not bricks or tablets, but questions. Who are we? Why do we build? Why do we write? Why do we dream of forever? The night deepens, the wind settles, the ruins fade into darkness. And as you drift towards sleep, the voice of the storyteller, that same eternal voice that began here, in the dust between the rivers, whispers gently in your ear, "You remember us now." That is enough. The wind has shifted again. It carries new scents. Cedarwood, foreign oils, and the sweat of strangers' beasts of burden. You stand by the old trade road that once fed Uruk's markets, and for the first time, you realize how quiet it's become. Not silent. No. The world is still alive, but changed. You can feel it in the rhythm of footsteps that no longer belong to Sumerians alone. From the north and the west, the Akkadians once came. Now others follow. The Elamites from the east, the Amorites from the deserts, traders from faraway lands who speak in rolling, unfamiliar tones. The land between the rivers has always been a crossroads. It's both the blessing and the curse of being the first civilization. Everyone eventually finds you. You trudge along the dusty path toward a city that still calls itself Sumerian, though its walls bear the symbols of half a dozen empires. Children chase goats through alleys that smell of dates and clay. A merchant with dark eyes and an accent you can't quite place offers you bronze trinkets. He says they're from Dilmun, but you suspect he made them himself. You buy one anyway, out of habit or nostalgia. The temples still rise over the city, though their gods have grown crowded. Enlil and Inanna share space now with Marduk and Ishtar. The old and the new pantheons overlap like layers of paint. You hear hymns in Akkadian, Sumerian, and something else entirely. A blending of tongues that sounds almost musical. Civilization hasn't died here. It's learned to speak in chords. You wander into a scribal school. The teacher, a stern man with a reed stylus and perpetually ink-stained hands, looks up at you. He's drilling a boy on cuneiform signs, the Sumerian signs. He sighs, must still be learned, even if the words themselves are ghosts. The boy groans, and the teacher gives him a sharp look. You almost smile. Some struggles never change. It's strange to think that by this point, around 2000 BCE, the Sumerians themselves are mostly memories in their own cities. Their language survives in tablets, their gods in names, their culture in habits, but their identity has melted into something larger. The Akkadian Empire has long since risen and fallen. The Gutians, mountain people from the east, briefly stormed through like a dust storm and vanished just as quickly. Now, the Amorites, a Semitic people from the western deserts, are pushing into the fertile plains, and in one of those city-states, Babylon, a new power begins to stir. It's here that the world begins to pivot again. Hammurabi's scribes will soon press the first great law code into stone, borrowing Sumer's principles, adapting them into a new order. The Code of Hammurabi, you'll hear of it centuries later in history books, owes its bones to Sumerian kings who wrote the first city laws. An eye for an eye, a house for a house. It all starts here, with clay tablets, and the conviction that justice can be written down. You walk along the riverbank, where merchants still unload their goods. Jars of olive oil, baskets of grain, textiles dyed in the deep red of madder root. You notice the accents again. Akkadian, Amorite, Elamite. People haggle, flirt, argue, and it's all strangely familiar. The city is alive with diversity, but you can sense the undercurrent of loss. Do you remember when the gods only spoke Sumerian? An old woman mutters beside you as she sells bread. You shake your head. She laughs softly. No one does. Not really. The world has moved on. But that doesn't mean the Sumerians are gone. Their fingerprints remain in the foundations of every structure that rises here, literal and cultural. The Akkadians borrow their writing. The Babylonians refine their law. The Assyrians inherit their obsession with order and record keeping. Even the Persians, centuries later, will draw from this deep well of bureaucratic logic. The first empire, it turns out, left a user manual. You sit on a cracked stone near an abandoned ziggurat and imagine all those conquerors who passed through. Each saw these same walls and thought, we can make it better. And in their way, they did. Adding bricks, stories, and sometimes fire. But even as empires fell, Sumer's core ideas, irrigation, writing law, and myth kept resurfacing like reeds after the flood. One of the quirkiest facts you'll learn: some of Sumer's temple hymns were still being sung in ritual form over 1,000 years after their language died. Priests didn't always understand the words anymore. They memorized the sounds phonetically. Imagine a future where people chant pop lyrics without knowing what they mean, just because it feels sacred. Humanity, apparently, has always loved tradition more than comprehension, and historians still argue whether these cultural fusions helped preserve Sumer or diluted it beyond recognition. Was Sumer absorbed into Akkad, Babylon, and Assyria like sugar dissolving in tea? Or did it quietly shape them from within, like a ghost haunting its descendants? You stroll into what was once a royal archive, now a jumble of broken tablets. The clay smells faintly metallic, as if the earth remembers every fingerprint. You pick up a shard that still bears neat wedge marks. Part of an administrative record. Maybe. 2 goats, 1 jar of beer. Received by the temple. You smile. Bureaucracy eternal and undying. Some of the tablets are older, far older. Records of kings long forgotten. And on one, half preserved, you read a Sumerian proverb: "A house built by another man is not yours." You whisper it aloud, and realize it's both practical and poetic. A warning to every conqueror: who could truly own what Sumer built? The air grows hot and still. The world is shifting again. You hear the hoofbeats of invading armies echoing across centuries. Each new wave brings destruction, but also preservation. When the Babylonians rebuild, they model their cities on Sumerian layouts. When the Assyrians codify their administration, they use Sumerian titles. Even the Persians, when they arrive, will honor ancient Mesopotamian deities in newly minted temples. Sumer endures by becoming invisible, the unseen skeleton beneath the muscle of newer empires. And then there's Egypt, far to the west, and the Indus Valley to the east. Trade had already linked them faintly in Sumer's day. Some goods, like lapis lazuli and tin, had passed through these same routes you now walk. But what really spread wasn't just material. It was method. Writing systems sprout in distant lands soon after Sumer's first tablets. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe ideas travel better than we think. The stars come out as you rest by the river. You think about how far this little patch of earth has influenced the world, and how much of it we still carry. The calendar, the city, the bureaucrat's desk, the law tablet, the flood myth, the poet's yearning for immortality. All seeds planted here, now grown into forests. A fisherman nearby hums an old melody. You can't place the language. It could be Akkadian, it could be Sumerian, it could be some blend that never made it to a textbook. But the rhythm feels ancient. You close your eyes and listen. It's tempting to romanticize these ruins, to imagine noble priests and wise kings, but deep down you know it wasn't all glorious. Empires rose because others fell. Prosperity bloomed for some while others starved. The same city that invented accounting also perfected the art of taxation. But maybe that's the real inheritance, the balance of brilliance and flaw. Civilization, after all, isn't just progress, it's compromise. A soft wind brushes your cheek, carrying the scent of warm dust and distant rain. You imagine the ghosts of Sumerian scribes watching from the shadows of their half-buried archives, smirking slightly, as if to say, "You think your world is new. We've seen it all before." And maybe they have. Because here, in this quiet land between the rivers, everything old eventually becomes new again. The night feels heavier now. The air is thicker, more tired, as if even the earth itself exhales. You stand at the edge of the ruins, and though the wind still carries the hum of life, frogs along the canal, the faraway bleating of goats, there's an ache underneath it all. Something is ending. You look around and realize this isn't just the decline of a city. It's the fading heartbeat of a civilization. The land that was once the shining jewel of the Fertile Crescent is changing. The soil, overworked and overwatered for centuries, has lost its vigor. Salt crusts shimmer on the fields where barley once stood waist-high. Rivers that used to swell with spring floods now wander off course, carving new paths, leaving old canals to dry into cracked ribbons of clay. A farmer kneels in the brittle mud, digging with shaking hands. You can almost hear the whisper of his prayer, not to Enlil or Inanna anymore, but to whatever god might still be listening. The people have new names for their gods now, but the prayers sound the same. "Let the earth forgive us," he murmurs. Historians still argue whether climate collapse, political strife, or invasion caused the final unraveling of Sumer. Maybe it was all three. Maybe civilizations, like people, rarely die from one wound. It's always 1,000 small ones that go unnoticed until it's too late. You pass through the gate of where guards once stood with spears gleaming in the sun. Now only a few stray dogs roam the streets, and half the houses have collapsed into piles of baked brick. The ziggurat still towers above, but the stairs crumble beneath your feet. The plaster peels away, revealing the bones of an age. Inside what used to be the great temple courtyard, you find remnants of offerings, broken figurines, clay vessels, fragments of inscriptions. One piece catches your eye, a prayer tablet. The script is faint, but the plea is unmistakable. "May our city rise again." It never did. Will fall around 2004 BCE, taken by the Elamites from the east. The last Sumerian king, Sin, will be dragged away in chains, his empire shattered. His lament will be copied for centuries afterward. "My city was destroyed, its walls torn down. The storm took the people, the gods turned their faces away." The world's first recorded elegy, the sound of history mourning itself. You walk through the ruins as the wind stirs the sand, and for a moment, you almost hear that lament carried on the air. But decline isn't always destruction. Sometimes it's transformation. The Babylonians inherit the land next, absorbing what's left of Sumer's cities, rewriting its stories in their own tongue. The flood myth becomes the epic of Gilgamesh's centerpiece. Sumerian gods take on Akkadian and Babylonian names. It's a strange sort of immortality, not in memory, but in metamorphosis. In the city of Babylon, scribes still study Sumerian as a sacred language long after no one can speak it. It's the Latin of the ancient world, old, revered, and just obscure enough to seem divine. The students groan as they copy dusty hymns. The black-headed people are beloved of Inanna. Their teacher smirks. "You are the black-headed people," he says, though he knows it's mostly metaphor by now. Even in decline, Sumer's influence threads through everything. The Babylonians take Sumer's systems of measurement, its mathematics, its lunar calendar. The Assyrians adopt Sumer's bureaucratic order, and its obsession with record-keeping. Every empire that rises here builds on the blueprints of Sumer. Like ghosts in clay, the Sumerians refuse to fade completely. You stop by the riverbank where reeds still sway, whispering secrets to the water. You think of the first Sumerian who pressed a stylus into wet clay, trying to make sense of the world. That same impulse, to record, to remember, is why we even know their names. Without those tablets, the Sumerians would have been lost to the dust forever. Writing didn't just make civilization possible, it made memory immortal. And yet, irony lingers. They invented writing, and still, their words nearly vanished. It would take modern archaeologists, thousands of years later, to hear their voices again. In the 19th century, explorers digging in Mesopotamia unearthed the first tablets. At first, no one could read them. They looked like strange chicken scratches, meaningless wedges pressed into clay. Then scholars cracked the code. Cuneiform spoke again. You can imagine the shock, the awe, the quiet thrill of realization. This is the world's first story. You picture those excavators under the relentless desert sun, brushing away millennia of dust. Slowly, Sumer's life reappeared. Their markets, their gods, their math, their heartbreaks. The first time someone read a Sumerian hymn aloud in modern times must have felt like resurrecting a voice from the dead. It's hard not to be romantic about that. But back in the ancient world, as you stand in its twilight, Sumer's people don't know they're being remembered. They just keep going, as people always do. Repairing canals, raising children, whispering prayers into a changing wind. Civilization doesn't collapse in a single night. It fades slowly, quietly, generation by generation. A father teaches his son how to patch a wall, not realizing the city will be gone before the boy's grandchildren are born. A mother needs bread, humming a song her grandmother taught her, a song no one will recognize in 100 years. These are the invisible threads that bind history together. And you, standing here thousands of years later, are tugging at one of those threads. You gaze out across the landscape as twilight falls. The horizon glows faintly pink, and for a moment, the ancient canals catch the light, turning to silver ribbons. You can almost imagine the land as it was, fertile, buzzing with life, full of the hum of irrigation wheels and the laughter of children in courtyards. It's still beautiful, even in decay. You start to realize something subtle: civilizations don't really die. They transform, merge, seed new beginnings. The people who once called themselves Sumerian didn't vanish. They became the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Persians, and, eventually, the entire thread of human civilization that follows. You can trace their DNA, literal and cultural, in every city that comes after. Even now, when you write a contract, calculate with numbers, or look at a calendar, you're echoing Sumer. The world they began hasn't ended. It's just grown up. Still, standing in the ruins, you feel the ache of time. You wonder if someday your own world will become like this. Cities eroded, languages forgotten. Only fragments left for someone to dig up and interpret. Maybe that's the secret lesson of Sumer. Nothing is permanent, but everything leaves a trace. As the sky darkens, you turn to leave the ruins. The stars are sharp and cold, just as they were when Sumerian astronomers charted them 5,000 years ago. They once believed the heavens were divine maps, messages from the gods. Maybe they were right. Maybe the stars are the only archives that never burn. You take one last look at the ziggurat, now just a shadow against the night. The wind sighs through the reeds, and for a moment, you think you hear words in it. Ancient, untranslatable, but full of meaning. Maybe it's not goodbye. Maybe it's just the world turning the page. You wake to a quiet dawn, not in Sumer, but in the soft hum of the present. Yet, for a moment, it feels as though the desert wind still moves through your hair, and the shadow of a ziggurat lingers somewhere just beyond sight. The story has carried you far, through reeds and riverbanks, through clay and fire, through the first heartbeat of civilization itself. And now, in the stillness, you realize that you've come full circle, back to yourself, standing in a world still shaped by Sumer's ghost. Because Sumer never truly left. You open your eyes and look around your modern room. The electric glow of a screen, the hum of your fan, the faint grid of city lights through the window, and in every angle, in every function, there is something ancient. The organization of streets outside echoes Uruk's first city plans. The calendar on your wall counts time, as the Sumerians once did, by lunar cycles. Even your paycheck, digital or not, is a descendant of the first clay receipts, pressed by temple accountants 5,000 years ago. You stretch your hand, and for a fleeting moment, you imagine a stylus between your fingers instead of a phone. The impulse is the same: to record, to share, to prove you existed. Writing has evolved from clay to code, but its soul hasn't changed. And you can almost hear the Sumerian scribe whisper, "We began this for you." You step through the imagined ruins once more. Not the broken cities of Ur or Lagash, but the ruins within modern life. The fragments of old myths, old habits, old dreams. The wheel on the car, the brick in the wall. The idea that cities should hum and never sleep. All born here, between the Tigris and Euphrates. Every time you read a story about a great flood, or a man seeking immortality, you're hearing the echo of Gilgamesh. Every time you look at the stars and wonder what's out there, you're repeating the questions that first filled the Sumerian night. Every time a politician promises order, or a poet writes about gods and dust and memory, they're speaking the same language, even if they don't know it. The Sumerians gave us more than inventions. They gave us the structure of thought. They taught us that you can draw lines on chaos, name things, count them, worship them, and make meaning out of mud. That's civilization's true beginning. The moment humanity decided, it didn't just want to live, it wanted to last. You wander past a museum in your mind's eye. Behind glass cases sit tablets covered in wedge-shaped marks. At first glance, they're just scratches. But then your eyes adjust, and you see an entire universe. Grain rations, love songs, star charts, beer recipes, tax ledgers, prayers. The full spectrum of life, pressed into permanence. You can almost smell the baked clay, still faintly warm with human touch. A funny thought crosses your mind. The Sumerians even recorded jokes. One tablet reads, "Something that has never happened since time began. A young woman did not fart in her husband's lap." You laugh softly. Across 5,000 years, humor survives. Even the ancients knew that laughter was part of the script. You keep walking, and the exhibits shift. From Sumer to Babylon, to Greece, to Rome, to the present, it's all one long continuum, a single, sprawling story with countless authors. The names change, but the script remains the same. Civilization is just Sumer retelling itself again and again, through different voices. Historians still argue whether Sumer's rise was an accident of geography or destiny. Was it the fertile floodplain that birthed greatness? Or was it the human will to organize, to build, to dream? But as you stand here, listening to the quiet pulse of your own world, your technology, your schedules, your laws, your screens, you realize it doesn't matter. The result speaks for itself. The Sumerians didn't just start civilization. They defined what it means to be human in one. You tilt your head back and imagine the constellations as they saw them. The bull of heaven, the scorpion, the archer. The same stars, the same fears, the same wonder. Maybe that's the real continuity. We've changed everything except the questions. Why are we here? Who built this world before us? And who will remember us when we're gone? Those were Sumer's questions, too. You let the image fade. The river, the reeds, the ziggurat crumbling under the stars. The scene softens until it feels almost like a dream you once had but can't quite recall. Yet the warmth of it lingers. You understand now that history isn't just facts and timelines. It's a lullaby. One generation whispering to the next, "We were here. Don't forget." And you, dear traveler, have listened. That's all they ever wanted. Wind down 300 words. So now, as the echoes fade, let yourself drift a little. The hum of the modern world quiets, replaced by that ancient rhythm. Water lapping against reeds, distant drums. The rustle of night wind over fields long turned to sand. You picture the Sumerian plain under starlight, soft and endless. The cities are gone, the gods are gone, even the rivers have shifted. But the night remains the same. You breathe in slowly, deeply, and the air feels heavy with all the lives that have passed through it. Somewhere out there, a clay tablet still waits under the earth, the imprint of a human hand still crisp, still patient. It has waited thousands of years to be touched again. maybe you'll be the one to find it. Or maybe it doesn't matter, because simply remembering is enough. Let your thoughts slow now. Like the rivers themselves, let them meander. You've walked beside kings and farmers, priests and scribes. You've watched temples rise and fall. And you've learned that every ending is just another translation. Civilizations change. Languages die. But the impulse to tell stories, to explain, to laugh, to leave a mark, that's eternal. And that means Sumer is eternal too, living quietly inside every city light, every written word, every dream of tomorrow. So close your eyes and imagine that first dawn over the Euphrates. The cool breeze, the smell of wet earth, the faint clatter of life beginning again. You've come full circle now. You can rest. The world remembers. Sweet dreams.